wonderful to be here and feel this very precious energy. And I want to thank all the dignitaries who are here and who supported and cooperated to allow us to have this time with all of you. And so thank you to all of them, but also thank you to all of you for being here now. Each one of the presenters shared something very, very beautiful from your own personal life story and the things that our counselor said, and also the exercises that we had just a few minutes ago. And so much appreciation for all of that. And yes, I agree with everything that has been said so far, and I support all of that totally. And what I'd like to focus on is the subject of inner well-being, because I think everything starts inside and then goes outside. And when the inside is working well, then everything, myself, relationships, everything works out beautifully. In the last few years, one of the subjects that has come up that didn't exist about 40 years ago, but it has existed about 30 years, is the whole subject of positive psychology. And I'm sure many of you must have studied it also. And I asked one of the teachers, early teachers, pioneers of positive psychology, what is it that suddenly we find the subject come up when psychology has existed as a social science for decades, from the end of the 19th century. How come we're suddenly paying attention to this? And she had a very interesting response. She said that the negative emotions and feelings that come like a sledgehammer, and they have a big impact, not only on the mind but on the body. Maybe not recently, maybe a long time ago, you felt a moment of anger. Yes? Not recently, I'm sure, but some time ago at some point, definitely. And what happens when anger comes? It's in the mind, but the impact on the physical body is huge. It raises your blood pressure, it raises your adrenaline, it makes your heart rate go faster, and it creates a huge repercussion within the body. And even if there's 5 minutes of anger, it creates feedback in the body, biological feedback, for about 30 minutes. 10 minutes of anger, and then as much as 40 minutes of feedback of the body, it's probably going to be 1 hour. But apart from that, the imprint it leaves on your mind is probably even deeper, and it will stay longer than for an hour. It will be guilt and upset with the self. There'll be a feeling that I've caused pain to others, which I shouldn't have done. All of these reactions happen in the mind, and they stay for a long, long time. But also, of course, it means the impact on relationships with others, and what happens to my connection with the people around me. Not only to the one person I got angry with, but also a whole range of other people who were watching at that time, or even happened to hear about it later on. And so it's very destructive, but it started just with one thought. Why is this person saying this? Why is this person doing this? And that one thought led to 1,000 other thoughts. Negative thoughts come very strongly and come like a sledgehammer. And it's difficult to control them and stop them or change them. And so that's one example. But she mentioned how things like anger and greed and possessiveness and jealousy, ego, all of these negative things have such an impact on the body itself that you can measure these. And so this is why early 20th century, mid 20th century, we were just looking at these negative traits of psychology. And it was only in the latter part of the 20th century that we were able to develop devices that could actually measure not just the physical impact, but what was going on in the brain in terms of our consciousness. And of course, brain is the hardware, but the software is the inner being, the spirit, the soul. And just imagine, my thoughts can now be measured, not only for their biological impact, but also just the quality of thoughts. And what they found was that if you have positive, pure, elevated thoughts, they're very fleeting, they're very light, they're very subtle. A moment of peace. It comes and you hear a sound and instantly that distraction takes away the peace. Or you smell something, a fragrance, and something triggers your memory, maybe good or bad, and so that comes flashing in. And so all these subtle aspects, compassion, kindness, how do you measure these? Not so easy. But today we have mechanisms by which we can measure what's going on in the brain and so on and so forth. And so she said that because these positive experiences, thoughts and feelings are so subtle, it's only in recent times we've been able to measure these. But then they had lots of different experiments to see what it is that can produce and create these positive thoughts and feelings and then be able to sustain those. Again, the results were very interesting. There are many things that make you feel good. Example, you don't have to raise your hands, but many like chocolate, not just children, but adults also. And chocolate has within it certain ingredients that give you a sense of well-being and make you feel good. That's fine. Have a small piece of chocolate and you feel good. Have a bar of chocolate, do you feel better? Well, maybe, but maybe not. But have another piece of chocolate or another bar, and it's not just bad for your teeth and your physical health, but also you really don't feel good anymore. I'm sure you must have seen it happen to others, or maybe it's happened to you yourself also. And the same thing with alcohol. Again, you reach a certain point, and beyond that, it certainly doesn't make you feel good anymore, rather it makes you sick. And of course, all the problems of addictions and dependencies, that's another whole story. The point is that if there are certain external things, when you eat or drink that make you feel good, it'll have a temporary effect. It won't have a long-lasting, sustainable effect. Go on a holiday, and maybe while you're experiencing something beautiful in the mountains or the beach or whatever it is, you come back home and you just arrive back at the airport or the train station and you see the chaos, or maybe the flight is delayed and the trains are not running, something goes wrong. What happens? Well, that's another story. So you can see that whatever the external things that make us feel good is fine, but it'll always be temporary. They came to one conclusion, that there was one thing that always brought immediate sense of well-being, and it could be sustained. You'd never reach a peak and then come down into the valley. It would always be producing the same positive result every single time. So I was very curious, what was that? And her answer was meditation. And maybe some of you already practice some form of meditation. I noticed mindfulness on the chart that we were being shown. Mindfulness is one aspect of meditation. And so definitely, if this becomes something that we adopt in our lives, what we're doing is training our minds to think in a positive, elevated way. It was very interesting when I was hearing the subject of the Million Minutes of Peace Appeal. And of course that was an amazing project, and I happened to be deeply involved in that at that time. The United Nations then asked us as Peace Messenger awardees. We received 7 Peace Messenger Awards, 6 ones for different countries, including the Philippines and Great Britain, but 1 international award also for our headquarters in India. They asked us to do a follow-up project. And the follow-up project was called Global Cooperation for a Better World. Long story, but just one sentence about it now. We asked people to share their visions of a better world. And the project reached 128 countries. The project took us 3 years to complete. And over a space of 6 months, we had 40 volunteers from across the world who looked at all the submissions that had come in, and guess what they all said? The answers from across the world about visions for a better world was values. If there were values, it would be a better world. And of course we all have values, but maybe we've lost touch with them. But the other interesting thing I want to highlight is we would have groups of people, maybe 6 in a group, maybe 8, and we ask them, as you share your vision of a better world, can you use positive language? Don't use negative language. For example, we don't want war. Then what's the positive of that? We want peace. We don't want disease. What's the positive of that? Better health. It took groups sometimes up to 20 minutes to realize that their language needed to change. And so the words that I use is the second phase. Before the words, it's in my mind. What are the thoughts that I'm having? Are they negative thoughts? Are they positive thoughts? Are they higher than positive thoughts, pure thoughts? Are they elevated thoughts? And so one can see how when one starts giving attention to what's going on in the mind, then our language changes, our behavior changes, our vision of others changes, and I believe that together we create a different type of culture. We create a culture of care, of compassion, of peace, of cooperation. And so mental care is absolutely vital and is the foundation for everything else. The things that are being suggested are all excellent. Have good friends you can trust so that they can share with you ins and outs. You can share with them. And when things are a little bit out of line, they'll help you come back online. And I don't mean machines, I mean here. Exercise is good, nutrition is absolutely important. Think about plant-based diet and drink for ecological reasons, for physical health reasons, but also for what's going on in my mind. There's a huge amount of research that's been done on this, and if anybody is wanting to find out more, it's all there on the internet. Find out about plant-based best diet, and you'll see the impact of that on all these three things: the health of the planet, the health of the body, and the health of the mind. It works on all levels. Meditation is what I want to focus on. Very simple, not complicated. And 50 years ago, when I started to share these ideas of meditation in London, after having studied and taken training in India, meditation was a very new word. It's actually a very ancient word. But it was again refound, rediscovered, and people were looking at it from different aspects. But today, meditation isn't a new word anymore. In fact, in some countries, it's become quite fashionable. It's fashionable to say, yes, I meditate, or yes, I'm learning to meditate. And this is why I feel that many of you here already practice some form of mindfulness or meditation, etc. The meditation that I'm going to talk about is very, very simple. Why? Because people always associate silence with meditation. And yes, there's a natural connection, but many people find it difficult to be silent. Stopping talking is easy, but to be silent in the mind is actually quite difficult. And the meditation I practice doesn't say stop thinking. It says use your mind in the best possible way. Use your mind to first go inside yourself. Just pause for a moment. How often is it that I think about the inner being? And how often is it that I'm actually creative in the thoughts that I have? Very different to where the mind is constantly reacting to things that I see, I hear, I read, I find out about on my devices. And so the mind is always in a reactive mode. And so what happens is that as a human being, I'm also constantly in a reactive mode. The meditation is saying, look at your thoughts. Watch your thoughts. And you'll probably find that your thoughts are racing in many, many different directions. But then comes a point where you say, okay, I want to learn to focus. I don't want to stop thoughts, but I'm going to learn to focus my thoughts. And I try focusing on a thought that is powerful and positive. For example, peace, love, truth. And there's a very interesting thing that happens. When I start focusing on one of these positive values, I begin to feel it. I begin to experience it. And it resonates. Why? Because the inner being is actually made up of these positive attributes. One of the beautiful things about the Philippines, whenever I come here, it's a joy to discover it again, is that the Filipino people have a lot of love for God. And they're not shy to talk about